Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. This may not be a story that would be considered a horror story, but it's one of those stories that makes it clear that you shouldn't go on dates with people that you don't know too well, or at least ask better questions about the person that you're going on a date with. This happened back when I was on a stint with dating apps, and there were a handful of guys that I matched with. But I was also a bit picky who I selected. There was one guy, we'll call him Chris, that I saw in the app. I thought that he would be a really good candidate. He was fairly attractive, was around my age, and his bio talked about how he was an entrepreneur and that he was always working on his next business venture. Maybe I had a thing for the business type, I don't know, but I matched him and he matched with me, and we were good to go from there. We chatted for a while on the app, and I told him about who I was and what I did, about how I was attending night classes to become a nurse, and he told me about who he was. Well, sort of. I asked him about his business ventures, and he avoided the question entirely, which to me was a bit sketchy. But I also thought that maybe he wanted to make sure that I wasn't just trying to get with him for the money. I know, kinda stupid. It would have made more sense for me to think that he was into drugs or other shady activities. Anyways, we talked for a bit and then decided that we would get together at a steakhouse in town. It was actually his suggestion, and he was almost insistent that we go to a specific steakhouse because he said that he loved their prime rib there. This guy was talking to me about getting prime rib at a steakhouse for a first date, so yes, I was a bit excited about seeing this through. Since first impressions are everything, I dressed up a little nicer than normal. I spent a lot of time making myself look presentable, and I really gave it my all. Again, a steakhouse for a first date. I get there, and I am sitting in the lobby area waiting for him to arrive. And when he does not look at all like I had anticipated. He was clearly a few pounds heavier than his pictures. His hair was longer, his facial hair was unkempt, and he looked like he hadn't showered in a few days. On top of that, his clothes were fairly loose-fitting and stained. I was a fair bit taken aback by his appearance, but in the end, was still wanting to go forward with this date. Our conversations were decent, and appearance isn't everything, so maybe he just had a really stressful week. We get to the table, and when the waiter comes to take our drink orders, he asked him to bring back 2 baskets of the free bread. He insisted that we needed 2 baskets. When they came to the table, this man grabs the small loaf and then starts staring into it like he hadn't eaten in days. And fast forward to the actual meal, and he orders the prime rib, as he said he would. I ordered the chicken parmesan because it sounded awesome. And after that, while we're waiting, I started wanting to talk to him and get to know him more. So I asked what kind of business venture he was currently working with. He laughed at my question and told me not to worry about it again. Well, that's a red flag. He then starts talking to me about nursing school and asking about how much it was costing me. This was a strange question, but I told him how much I was paying to get my license. He then proceeds to tell me that I needed to quit nursing school and take all the money that I was spending on it and then put it into Bitcoin. Now, I know that currently Bitcoin would be a good investment had I gotten in way back, but this was in December of 2017 when it peaked. This man was telling me to drop my career aspirations and invest all my money into it when it was like 15K. Had I done so, I would have lost everything when it tanked only a month later. He then continued to tell me that he put all of his life savings into it a week prior and that he was going to be a millionaire because of it. Suddenly, the night kind of made sense. He had pushed all the money he had into Bitcoin, and he meant all of his money. He was broke, and he was using the dating apps to find other targets to get them to invest and possibly get a free meal. This last part became apparent when he asked me if I would pay because he had forgotten his wallet. At the end of the meal, he asked the waiter for 2 boxes and an extra loaf of bread. He then crammed all of his leftovers into one box with what was left on the table, and then filled the other with my leftovers and the extra bread. I almost felt bad for him at this point. He was clearly very broke. Well, let me restate that. I would have felt bad for him had he not expected me to pay, and then ordered a $25 cut of beef while I ordered a $10 item. Anyways, I guess the whole moral of the story is, get to know people before you go on a date with them, and try your best not to be a meal ticket for someone that doesn't know how to invest their money. I know Bitcoin is doing great nowadays, but investing when he did was stupid, and I can't imagine it worked out well for him back then. And no, there was no second date. I got into online dating due to being introverted. I don't like going out to bars or other highly social places, and I prefer spending time with a few people only. So, I made a profile, uploaded some pictures, left some information about myself, and I started chatting to people. I wouldn't say that I found anyone that I clicked with. Some of them were okay. There were obvious scammer accounts where they would have models as their profile pictures. When Henry, not his real name, contacted me, his pictures were of a handsome man. But they weren't too handsome, if you get what I mean. They were still realistic and not too polished, so I didn't think that they were fake. We started chatting, and we had a lot of similar interests. In fact, I've never met anyone as into the things that I'm into. I didn't realize at that time that he was just mimicking me and wasn't actually interested in what I was talking about. The conversation got flirty, and I admit that I indulged in it. I started talking to him every day, and it was part of my routine. And to be honest, I really enjoyed it. We talked on the phone, and he sounded exactly what I imagined him to. We would go and talk for hours, and after another week, we decided to finally meet. He said that he hoped that I would like him in the flesh. I laughed, telling him how silly he was being and not to worry. The day came and I got to the restaurant first, and I sat down on the table. He texted me to warn me that there was some traffic and that he would be a little late. I didn't mind. I sat and people watched when an old man approached the table. He then stood there with his arms wide for a hug, and I awkwardly said hello. He said, "Aren't you happy to see me?" I stared up at him in confusion when I realized what just happened. He catfished me. I sat there with my mouth open like a fish, trying desperately to come up with something to say, and I couldn't even hide the look on my face. I don't know why, but I stood up, awkwardly hugged him, and he pulled me into a tight hug. At this point, I just felt bad for him. I thought that he must have been a lonely old man who just wanted some company. But he didn't let go until I gently pushed him away. You don't quite look like your pictures," I said, after blubbering for a bit. "Oh, those are my grandson's pictures. He's good looking, isn't he?" He didn't seem fazed by this and then sat back down. I looked around and wanted someone to help me. Henry started talking about how happy he was that we got to finally meet, and it was oddly wholesome at first. Well, until he said how excited he was to be taking me back to his place to have sex with me. While he was looking over at the menu, he started talking about all the things that he wanted to do to me and that he was excited to have a mistress. So, that was also how I found out that he was still married as well. I didn't care about letting him down gently, and clearly, he wasn't just an innocent, lonely old man. I stood up, told him that I would never be interested in someone like him, and to never contact me again. I picked up my bag, I started walking away, and he then reached over and grabbed my arm really hard. It hurt, and I had dark bruises on my arm afterward. He told me that he came all this way to see me, and he called me quite a few horrible names, telling me that I was a tease and that I had led him on. I pushed him away again and I screamed for him to leave me alone. A waiter approached and asked what was the problem. I told him, and fortunately, it gave me enough time to get away and then get to my car. I drove as fast as I could within the speed limit. I got home and I saw that he had sent me so many messages. Some were him begging me to come back, others were calling me a variety of slurs, others saying how horrible I was, and I just blocked him. After that, I would get some messages from other accounts, and the writing would be similar. One managed to slip through and I recognized him. I yelled at him to leave me alone, and I reported the account. So, I've learned to do video chat with every prospective date before I go to see them. All of this just to avoid any issues, and so far, it has gone pretty good. I found someone and things are going well, so I didn't need the apps anymore. I deleted them all. The creepy old guy is a story that gets a lot of giggles now when I say it, but it was exhausting at that time. I went to one of these matchmaking parties a while back. I was tired of being alone, and I just really wanted to meet a nice guy. I'm a woman, by the way. And now, I realized that I was better off staying alone, and you'll soon find out why I feel that way. It went kind of well, and I actually ended up being asked out by someone. The guy wasn't exactly my type if I'm being honest. I mean, he was pretty good looking, but I think that he was a little immature for me. Also, he was younger too. I decided to give him a try because he asked me out for a drive, and I thought that that was a little more interesting than just sitting in a coffee house sharing awkward silences. He came to pick me up in the morning, and I got in his car and then we set off for our driving date. We planned on going to a little tourist location with some great views. We were going to have lunch, and then we would head home in the evening. It was a nice morning and afternoon. He convinced me that he wasn't as immature as I thought he was, and overall, it was a fun date. When it started to get dark out, we set about heading back to our hometown. It was when we were driving home that night that I noticed a change in his behavior. He was starting to act strange. The vibes he was putting out were very much, "I don't want you to go yet," and "please don't leave me" kind of vibe. I put up with his neediness, expecting him to change his attitude once he noticed that it was making me uncomfortable. But he didn't change. His neediness and bossiness were strong. The guy who had made me laugh and who I was keen to having a second date with was gone. And now, a domineering and controlling guy was sat in the driver's seat. We had discussed earlier how we both had work in the morning. I thought about that part of our date, as I noticed how dark it was getting out. He wasn't interested in trying to converse with me any longer, nor was he interested in trying to make me smile or laugh. He had created such a horrible atmosphere in the car that I could hardly bring myself to mention to him about how late it was getting. I decided that I would ditch him as soon as I was able to get out of the car, and for my plan to work, I just needed for him to stop the car. We were going down dark country lanes, and there weren't many opportunities to ask him to stop. I bided my time, and when I saw the lights of a convenience store up ahead, I said aloud the sentence that I had been practicing in my mind for the last 15 minutes. "Hey, do you mind pulling over? I want to use the bathroom," I asked. He agreed, and I thought that I would get away from this weirdo. I expected him to pull over into the convenience store's parking lot, but then he zoomed past it. I said something like, "Hey, why didn't you stop?" And he replied, "I know a public restroom closer to home." I hated that. He could have easily stopped, but he didn't. He eventually did stop, but he stopped at a public bathroom in the middle of nowhere. I doubted that there would even be cell reception, but I checked my phone before getting out, and I noticed that I had a couple of bars. I figured that I would be able to guide someone to come and pick me up from here, or at least share my location, so I took my chance. I got out of the car, stood up, and then stooped to pick up my handbag. I grabbed one handle of the bag and I turned to walk to the bathroom. And then I felt some resistance. It was like my bag was stuck. I looked back and I saw my date was holding the other handle of my bag. I stood there stunned. I couldn't believe that this guy could get any worse. My eyes then met his and he said to me, "Do you really need that if you're just using the bathroom?" I had just dropped my phone in my handbag, so I couldn't even grab that. I froze. I really didn't know what to do. I couldn't be left out in the middle of nowhere with no bag, no phone, and no coat. I wasn't really paying attention to what roads we have been on, so I don't know how long it would take for me to get home. I reluctantly had to get back in that creep's car, and then we set off. I had to hide my fear from him. He was controlling, but he wasn't going to beat me. I didn't want him to think that he had some kind of power over me, and I didn't want to give him that victory. I next tried to hint that it was hot and I needed something to drink. I was surprised that he really didn't need all that much convincing. I guess that he was thirsty too. At this point, we had been driving around and around for a couple of hours. As we approached the convenience store, he parked up in the furthest away spot and said that he would be right back. He darted out of the car, and I thought to myself, "Whew, now's my chance." I tried to make a break for it as he ran into the store, but the door wouldn't budge. He must have had some kind of lock activated. He then came back and he had a big smile on his face. As soon as he opened his door, I shot across into his seat and then pushed my weight against the door, and this caused him to back up a little. I told him that if he didn't leave me alone, that I would be calling the police. One of the convenience store staff members stepped out at that perfect time to take out the garbage bags and was alerted to our heated exchange. When he realized that he was being watched, he looked at me and then shook his head and then got in his car and sped away. I called a taxi and I got myself home. I was shaken up, but I tried my best to hold it together until I was behind a closed door. And then it all came out. I was really upset. I later found out when I spoke to the police about him that he had stalked his ex-girlfriend and had an official police caution just a month before that we went out on our driving date. It feels amazing to be saying that I got home in one piece because I truly don't know what this guy is capable of. I hope that I never run into him again. When I first met Alex, everything seemed perfect. We met at a local coffee shop, one of those cozy places with soft jazz playing in the background and a comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. He was sitting at a corner table, absorbed in a book, when I accidentally bumped into his chair. Apologies were exchanged, followed by small talk, and before I knew it, we were talking like old friends. There was an immediate spark between us. Alex was charming, with a warm smile and an easygoing manner. We started seeing each other regularly, and I was quickly drawn into his world. He seemed to have a fascination with art and literature, often surprising me with tickets to gallery openings or literary readings. I found his interest intriguing and refreshing. Usually my partners loved partying and drinking, but this was new to me, and to be honest, I liked it. I didn't even know that I had this side to me. As weeks turned into months, I fell for him deeply. He seemed to know me so well, always knowing the right things to say, and he was incredibly attentive. My friends noticed a change in me, and they were happy that I found someone who seemed so genuine and caring. Yet, there was always this small voice in my mind that wondered if everything was too good to be true. Despite the happiness, little things started to not add up. Once, I noticed that he was uneasy when I asked about his family. He changed the subject quickly, and I thought that he was just a private person or had a difficult past that he didn't want to discuss yet. But then, other inconsistencies started to pop up. His stories about work often changed, and there were times when I couldn't reach him for hours or even days. He never invited me to his place, and he often gave me vague excuses about renovations or how he was embarrassed about his messy home. Suspicion began to gnaw at me, so I decided to do a little investigating on my own. I started with the simplest step, Googling his name. And to my surprise, there was hardly any trace of Alex online. No social media presence, no mention of him in any articles or professional directories. It was as if he didn't exist prior to meeting me. But then again, there are people like that, those that keep to themselves and don't really put anything online. Feeling uneasy, I would gently probe him for more information, subtly asking questions about his life and his background, and he always had answers. But the more he talked, the more I realized how little I actually knew about him. One evening, I decided to follow him after our date. I know, it was wrong of me, and I'll allow you to scold me in the comments about it, but I just needed to know who Alex really was. I watched as he walked down the street, turning into an unfamiliar neighborhood. I followed at a distance, feeling a mix of anxiety and guilt. And he then entered a small apartment building, and I waited outside, unsure of my next move. And after a while, I saw something that I did not expect. I saw him through a window, but he was not alone. A woman and a child appeared, greeting him warmly. My heart sank. Is this his family? Is he living a double life? What a psycho! My confusion turned to anger and then to betrayal. I left. I needed time to process what I had seen, and over the next few days, I kept my distance, avoiding his calls and his texts. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Who is this guy really? What was he hiding? I decided to confront him eventually, not with accusations, but I just wanted to seek the truth. When we met, he sensed that something was off. I chose my words carefully, expressing my concerns on what I had discovered. His reaction was unexpected, though. Instead of denying or becoming defensive, he seemed resigned, almost as if he had been expecting this moment. Alex confessed that he had been living under a false identity. He's using a fake name and background to escape a troubled past. The woman and child that I saw were his sister and niece, not a secret family, but he had hidden them because of the issues with a dangerous former acquaintance. He explained that his real name was Timothy and that he had been trying to start anew, free from his past. His confession left me with mixed feelings. Part of me understood his need to protect himself and also his family, but I also felt deceived and hurt. My trust had been broken, and I wasn't sure if it could be rebuilt. So I told him that I needed time to think, to decide if I could continue the relationship, knowing everything that he has hidden from me. In the days that followed, I reflected on everything. I realized that while the truth was unsettling, Timothy was still the person that I had grown to care for. Yet I couldn't ignore the weight of his deception, and also the possibility of being in danger. It was a really hard decision, but I knew that I had to prioritize my peace and my safety. We eventually parted ways, amicably, but with a lingering sadness of what could have been. The experience taught me valuable lessons about trust, honesty, and the importance of truly knowing someone before giving your heart away. So, Timothy, or Alex as I once knew him, I genuinely hope that you and your family are safe and doing okay. But let's not meet again. This happened about 5 years ago. I randomly just felt like I wanted to share this with someone, and I also hope that this can help other people in a similar situation. I had just gotten out of a 2-year-long relationship, living in the city I moved to my then boyfriend for. And after he left, I felt lonely and heartbroken. I was stuck in the apartment that we had shared, so I downloaded Tinder to chat to guys as a way of coping with a breakup. There, I matched with this guy. He was about 4 years older than me. He was extremely handsome and charming, and he was very much into fitness and had an amazing body. After talking for a few days, he asked me to meet, so we did. He came over to my house, and I was immediately attracted to him. He was a bad boy, the kind that I usually fall for. But he was also very sweet in the way that he talked to me. He kept complimenting me and doing sweet stuff for me. And after a few days of meeting, we ended up having sex, and it was honestly the best sex that I have ever had. I felt this intense chemistry between us. We started hanging out and having sex a lot. At that time, I did smoke weed a lot, and I know he smoked too and did some other drugs. I didn't really care much at that time. Eventually, he would keep asking me to hang out pretty much every day, begging me to come over because he missed me. When I told him that I was too tired, he would bribe me with stuff, like saying that he would give me massages, weed, dinner, romantic things, and then give me the best night of my life, etc. He didn't like it when I told him no. He would sometimes get angry, send me a bunch of messages just pleading for me to come over. He would often shower me with compliments, but then get angry when I said that I didn't have time to hang out with him. One time that I was at his house, he got a phone call from someone. After he hung up, he told me that I had to go upstairs and hide because his baby mama was coming over. He didn't want her to see me, saying because she was crazy. He told me so many stories of crazy stuff that she had apparently done, and I believed him. He was very convincing, and I believe this happened twice. And now I know I should have seen the red flags. I probably did to some extent, but I didn't care much at that time. I kept hanging out with him a lot, even though I figured out that he was heavy on drugs. One day, I was at his house and we had sex. I had smoked a lot and he was on coke and probably some other stuff too. He wanted to do it again, but he got frustrated that he couldn't get it up. He got mad and kind of blamed me for it. He yelled at me to squeeze it harder, and I just kept getting more frustrated. I felt uncomfortable and I wanted to leave, but he wanted me to stay. He tried to continue, but it didn't work. I was extremely uncomfortable at this point and I felt embarrassed. And after a while, I told him that I wanted to leave. He then told me to give back the weed that he gave me. As his mind, it was his payment to me for being with him. I honestly felt so pissed that I just grabbed my stuff and I walked out the door, and he followed me. At first, he walked calmly about 30 meters behind me, begging me to stay with him, asking where I was going, and I just kept walking and saying no. But he then ran towards me. I picked up my phone to call a friend of mine because I could tell that he was getting aggressive. I turned around and I saw him literally tear his shirt open and stomping towards me. He grabbed my phone out of my hands and then kicked me in my stomach so hard that I fell into a ditch. He then smashed my phone to the ground and told me, "Ha, you're done." And I thought that he was going to beat me up, but then it looked like he was actually trying to contain himself for a second, and he just turned around and left. I was mortified by what he had done. I ran away shaking, and I can't even remember how I got home, but somehow I did. I was able to borrow a phone from someone and called my friend. He then came over, and I had bruises on my stomach and legs and had no phone. I also called the police using a friend's phone, and I told them that I wanted to press charges. A few days later, he then messaged me saying that I tried to steal from him, that I took advantage of him just to get some weed. And a few hours later, he then texted me saying sorry. And then a few more hours later, he texted asking what had happened to me yesterday. And then, a week later, he found out that I had reported him to the police. He was mad. He said he couldn't believe that I reported him. And then, he told me that he would give me 2 new phones, or whatever I wanted, if I withdrew the report. That he wouldn't contact me anymore if I just did it. He just didn't want any trouble and didn't want to lose his daughter. I didn't answer. And then, he sent another message, fabricating the whole story of what happened that night. He kept harassing me for weeks with messages. Some days he would be begging for us to get back together or be friends. He would be bribing me. And other days, he was accusing me of random stuff and calling me names and saying that he would get a great lawyer and that he would report me to the police for stuff that I had never actually done. He kept acting like a smart ass, saying that he would beat me in court, and it all just became a big chaos. After a few months, there was a trial. I couldn't attend physically, so I testified via a phone call. I was questioned about our relationship and the incident that night. He lied and made up stories about me, but no one believed him. And as the trial was done, I received all the papers in the mail. I was shocked when I read it. He had previously been charged with violence and rape towards his ex. Apparently, there was also an incident where he had forced his ex-girlfriend to touch herself while multiple other men watched and videotaped her. There were other girls too that had experienced similar things. There was stuff like robbery, weapons, fights, violence, and torture, you name it. He had been to jail multiple times. I had no idea that I had been dealing with such a dangerous man. I'm pretty sure he's a psychopath. He has no understanding of what he has done, and the sick part is, I recently came across a post about him on Facebook. Apparently, he is pretty popular with women lately on Snapchat and Instagram. He posts stuff about his life, whining about being beaten up by random men, being tortured or robbed, and etc. That people follow him with guns. I have learned that the reason that he keeps being beaten up by people is because they know what he has done. He posted pictures of himself at the hospital to make people feel bad for him, and they do. He makes women feel sorry for him. He says that people lie and makes up stories about him, and he gains pity. He then posts all the sweet replies and messages girls send him, saying stuff like he feels so grateful for all the support. He's extremely good at manipulating people. I honestly feel so lucky that I got away at the time that I did, and that it didn't escalate any further. I checked his Facebook and apparently he has a girlfriend now, and I just pray that he doesn't hurt her in any way. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared because your fear feeds me.